The mining outpost stood in silence on the edge of a rocky moon. The storm that had swept across the land earlier had left the ground cracked and broken. Shards of glassy stone sparkled in the weak light, and long trails of dust still floated in the thin air. The crew had stayed inside their main dome for hours, waiting for the storm to pass. Once the scanners reported clear skies, a patrol was sent to check the outer area for damage. Among the patrol walked a man named Marco. He was not the strongest worker, nor the most skilled, but he was steady. His job was to check the outer vents and report any leaks, but his eyes wandered beyond the machines. He was the kind who noticed small things others ignored. On this day, it was that habit which drew him to a strange site far from the usual patrol path. At first he thought it was only wreckage from a mining drone. Twisted metal lay across the slope, half buried in dust, and black smoke drifted upward. He moved closer and saw that this was no human machine. The surface was carved with marks, sharp and curved like symbols. The hull was smooth, not like human designs, and its color shifted faintly as if alive. Marco paused, his heart beating faster. He knew at once it was a vessel not made by his people. Cautiously, he stepped into the broken craft. The air smelled sharp like burnt stone. Inside, wires hung like vines, and broken panels sparked in the dim light. He expected to see nothing but ruin, yet a soft sound reached his ears. It was weak, like a cry muffled under heavy cloth. Marco froze. He turned his head, listening again, and the sound came once more. It was not the voice of any machine. He followed it to a corner where a cracked pod lay open. Inside, curled up in the wreck, was a tiny creature. Its body was scaled, but the scales had no color. They looked pale, almost white, as if life was leaving them. Its limbs were thin, trembling with effort as it tried to move. Two small eyes looked up at him, glassy and full of fear. Marco knelt beside the pod. He did not know what this creature was. He had never seen its kind in any report. Yet something about its size struck him. It was no warrior, no danger, only a hatchling. The faint cry that had reached his ears came again, weaker now. Without thinking, Marco stretched out his hand. The hatchling lifted its small claws, touched his glove, and then let its head fall against his palm. For a moment he stayed there, unsure of what to do. Training told him to report strange life at once, to wait for command. But another voice inside him spoke louder. This creature was dying. Every breath it took was shallow, and its body shook with weakness. If he left it here, it would not survive. He could see the truth in its fading eyes. Marco removed his outer pack and carefully wrapped the hatchling in a thermal sheet. The small body felt light as he lifted it. He held it close to his chest where the heat of his suit could reach it. The creature gave a faint sound, then fell silent, but he felt a slow beat against his arm. Its heart was still fighting. He turned back toward the outpost, moving quickly across the broken ground. The other workers in the patrol spotted him and raised their voices. "What is that you are carrying?" one of them called. "Leave it, Marco. We cannot bring alien things inside," another warned. Marco ignored their words. He kept walking, his grip firm. The hatchling stirred once, making a weak sound that made him tighten his hold. He knew he could not abandon it. Whatever danger lay ahead, he would face it later. Right now, the creature needed care. When he reached the outer doors of the dome, the guards stepped forward to block him. Their eyes widened when they saw the bundle in his arms. "You cannot bring that here," one guard said. "It could be sick. It could carry danger." "Put it down," another added. Marco shook his head. "If I put it down, it will die. I cannot do that." "Open the door." The guards hesitated, torn between rules and the look in his eyes. At last, one of them spoke to the control room. The doors opened with a hiss, and Marco stepped through, carrying the hatchling close. Inside the dome, workers gathered around him, whispering. Some looked fearful, others curious, but none moved to help. Marco carried the bundle straight toward the medical wing. The chief medic, a stern woman named Mara, stopped him at the entrance. "What have you done?" she asked sharply. "I found it in the wreck outside. It is hurt." "Please help it," Marco said. Mara frowned. "This is no human child. I do not know what it is, and I do not know what care it needs. You may have put us all in danger by bringing it here." Marco held the hatchling closer. "It is small. It is weak. Look at it. Whatever it is, it deserves a chance." The medic studied the tiny creature, her expression tight. She sighed at last. "I cannot promise much, but I will see what I can do." Marco laid the hatchling gently on a bed. Its chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, and its small claws gripped the blanket. The medics began checking its vitals, speaking in low voices as they struggled to read the alien signs. Marco stood beside the bed, refusing to leave. Hours passed as the medics tried their best. They gave fluids, measured the faint heartbeats, and adjusted the lights to keep the hatchling warm. Still, its strength faded. Marco stayed by its side, his hand near its tiny form, whispering soft words, though he knew it could not understand. The others in the outpost muttered about danger. Some said he had brought doom on them. Others argued that the creature might be valuable, perhaps a source of knowledge. But none of them cared the way Marco did. To him, it was not a prize or a threat. It was a life. As night fell on the rocky moon, Marco sat in silence beside the bed. The hatchling stirred faintly, turning its head toward him. For a moment, its eyes opened wider, and in them he saw something he could not explain. Not fear, not pain, but trust. The small creature pressed closer to his hand and then drifted into uneasy sleep. Marco felt a weight in his chest. He did not know what future this choice would bring. He did not know what kind of beings might come looking for this hatchling, or what dangers it might carry. But he knew he would not regret it. On that night, in the quiet of the medical wing, a bond was formed. A human miner on a lonely outpost had chosen to carry a life not his own, and the galaxy would one day remember that choice. The outpost was never built to handle mysteries. It was a place of hard work, simple rules, and endless stone. The workers mined the rocky moon for rare minerals, loaded the cargo, and sent it off to the human fleet. Life followed a pattern. But once Marco carried the hatchling into the dome, nothing was the same again. The medical wing became a place of tension. The hatchling lay in the small bed, covered in layers of fabric, its tiny chest rising and falling with uneven rhythm. Lights flickered above, showing its pale scales and fragile limbs. The medics struggled with every reading. None of their machines were designed for alien biology. Every time a number flashed on the screen, they had to guess its meaning. Some values were too high, some too low, and some unknown. Marco stayed close. He rarely left the room, watching the hatchling's slow breaths with worry. He did not care if he was tired. He did not care if others whispered behind his back. He had made a choice, and he would see it through. Outside the room, talk spread among the workers. Some said the creature should be removed. Others argued that it might be dangerous. "We do not know what it is," one miner said. "What if it grows teeth and claws once it heals?" another added. Fear grew with every rumor, and suspicion pointed at Marco. The captain of the outpost, a man named Harlan, finally called a meeting. All workers gathered in the main hall. The captain stood before them, his face set with lines of strain. "We have lived here by simple rules," Harlan said. "We mine, we survive, we obey command. Now Marco has broken those rules. He brought an unknown life into our dome. None of us know what it is or what danger it brings. The question is simple. Do we keep it or cast it out?" The hall erupted in voices. Some shouted to remove it at once. Some said to wait. Only a few stood silent, unsure. Marco stepped forward. His voice was not loud, but it carried weight. "I found it alone, hurt and dying. It is a child, no matter what form it has. We are human. We do not leave children to die." The hall grew quiet. Even those who feared the hatchling could not deny his words. The captain frowned but gave a short nod. "For now, it stays. But the risk is on you, Marco. If trouble comes, remember that choice." From then on, Marco carried a heavy burden. Every eye followed him when he walked the dome. Some eyes carried anger, some doubt, some respect, but he ignored them all. His focus was only the hatchling. Each day he sat beside the bed, speaking softly. He told stories of his home, of rivers and fields the hatchling could never know. He hummed low tunes, hoping the sound would soothe the fragile being. And slowly, very slowly, the hatchling began to respond. At first it only opened its eyes for longer moments. Then it tried to lift its head. Its small claws reached toward his hand, gripping his finger with faint strength. These signs filled Marco with hope, but outside the dome something else was happening. The wreck he had found still lay on the rocky slope. Unknown to the humans, part of its system was still alive. A hidden beacon pulsed faintly, sending signals into the void. The storm that had wrecked the craft had not broken that peace. Now every few seconds a wave of energy carried the hatchling's presence far across the stars. Inside the dome, the humans were blind to this. They thought their troubles ended at the hatchling's bed. But the beacon's pulse had already reached distant ears. Somewhere in the vast dark, ships began to change course. Marco had no knowledge of this. His world was only the small life before him. One evening, as he sat with the hatchling, he noticed its eyes following his movements. The pale glow in them was stronger now. The creature made a faint sound, not a cry, but a call. Marco leaned closer. "You will live," he said gently. "I will see to it." The hatchling pressed against his hand, then fell asleep again. That small act filled him with warmth he had never known. In all his years of mining, he had never felt needed in this way. Machines did not care if he lived or died. Rocks did not notice his labor. But this small being, unknown and fragile, trusted him completely. The days passed, and the hatchling's strength returned slowly. It began to sit up with help, its small body still weak but no longer fading. Marco fed it with drops of water mixed with nutrient fluid. The medics watched with cautious eyes, noting its progress, though none dared claim success. Still, not all was calm. Tension spread among the crew. Supplies were low, and the storm had damaged one of the storage tanks. Some argued that resources should not be wasted on an alien life. "We must think of our own survival first," they said. Marco heard their words, but he would not yield. "A life is a life," he answered. "If we throw it away, what does that make us?" His stubbornness earned him both respect and anger. Some saw him as a hero, others as a fool. But no one could move him from the hatchling's side. One night, as the dome rested, a strange tremor shook the scanners. Lights flickered on the control boards. The captain frowned, thinking it was a common glitch. But the signals repeated, stronger each time. They came not from the moon's surface, but from space. Something was approaching. In the medical wing, Marco felt none of this. He sat in calm silence, watching the hatchling dream. But in the dark void above, massive ships moved with purpose. They had heard the beacon. They were coming. The crew of the outpost did not yet know what awaited them. They only saw the faint signs on their scanners growing brighter with every hour. The captain tightened his grip on the console. He had seen war before, and he knew this was no ordinary signal. Meanwhile, Marco leaned back in his chair, unaware of the storm that drew near. The hatchling stirred, pressing its claws into the blanket. Marco placed his hand over it, steady and warm. He thought only of tomorrow, when perhaps the small creature might stand on its own. Yet tomorrow would bring more than healing. Tomorrow would bring the arrival of forces beyond his imagination, and because of one choice on a broken slope, humanity's fate would soon change forever. The mining outpost had known storms before. It had known shortages, broken machines, and even fights among workers. But it had never known fear like this. For days, the scanners on the main deck showed strange patterns. Signals came and went, stronger each time, like footsteps approaching in the dark. Captain Harlan stood before the screens with his arms crossed. His face was hard, but his eyes betrayed unease. He had spent half his life in space and had learned to read the signs. The signals were not natural. They were not echoes from rocks or storms. They came from ships, big ones. Many of them. The crew whispered behind him. They knew what the signs meant. Something powerful was moving through the void, and it was headed toward their small outpost. Harlan called a council in the command room. The heads of each sector gathered around the table. The air was tense, filled with the low hum of machines. "We cannot deny it," Harlan said. "A fleet is on its way. The signals grow closer each hour. If they are hostile, we cannot fight them. We are miners, not soldiers. Our weapons are weak, our shields thin," the engineers muttered. The medics frowned. The workers shifted uneasily. Finally, Mara, the chief medic, spoke. "Could it be connected to the hatchling?" she asked. Her voice was calm, but her words carried weight. The room fell silent. Harlan's jaw tightened. "I thought the same. That wreck on the slope may have belonged to them. If so, they may not forgive us for what Marco did." A low murmur spread around the table. Some cursed under their breath. Others looked fearful. One man slammed his fist down. "I told you from the start. That thing should never have been brought here. Now it calls its kind to us. We are doomed because of it." Harlan raised a hand. "Enough. We do not yet know their intent, but we must prepare." While the council argued, Marco stayed by the hatchling's side. He knew nothing of the signals or the fear in the command room. His world was the quiet beat of the hatchling's heart, the faint glow of its eyes, the way its small claws reached for him when it stirred. He lived in the stillness of the medical wing while outside the storm of fear grew. That evening, the hatchling began to change. Its pale scales shimmered faintly, showing lines of color that had not been there before. Symbols like tiny stars flickered across its crest. Marco noticed it first, leaning close in wonder. "You are healing," he whispered. "You are stronger now." The hatchling made a sound, soft but steady. It was not a cry this time. It was a note, like a call. The sound carried through the room, gentle but powerful. The medics froze, staring at the small creature. They felt the sound in their chests, as if it touched more than ears. One of the medics whispered, "What is it doing?" Marco only shook his head. "I think it speaks." The hatchling's eyes glowed faintly, and for a brief moment the machines in the room flickered. Screens flashed strange symbols no human program had written. Then the light steadied again, and the hatchling fell back into quiet rest. The medics looked at Marco with wide eyes. He did not know what had happened, but he felt certain of one thing. This creature was not ordinary. News of the event spread quickly. By the next day, the whole outpost knew of the glow, the sound, the strange effect on the machines. Fear doubled. Some whispered the hatchling was a weapon. Others believed it a curse. Marco stood firm. "It is only a child. Do not blame it for what you fear." But even as he spoke, the signals on the scanners grew stronger. The fleet was close now. Too close. On the 5th day after the wreck, the void outside the moon changed. The scanner screamed with alerts. Dozens of ships appeared at the edge of range, massive shapes that blotted out the stars. The crew rushed to the observation deck, staring through the reinforced glass at the dark silhouettes. Gasps filled the air. The ships were vast, larger than any human craft. Their hulls shone with shifting colors, alive with energy. Their weapons glowed faintly, though none yet fired. They surrounded the outpost like hunters encircling prey. Panic spread at once. Workers shouted. Some demanded to surrender. Others begged to flee, though their ships were too slow to escape. The captain's voice boomed through the hall, ordering calm, but even he struggled to hide the strain in his tone. "We cannot outfight them," Harlan said. "Our only chance is to speak." A signal flashed across the system. A transmission request. Harlan swallowed hard and accepted it. The main screen lit up. At first, only darkness showed. Then a figure appeared. It was tall, regal, with a crest of glowing scales that framed a face both fierce and graceful. The alien queen stared into the human hall with eyes like fire. Her voice filled the room, deep and commanding. "You carry what is mine," she said. Every human in the hall froze. The meaning was clear. Harlan bowed his head slightly. "We mean no harm. One of our men found a child among wreckage. It was wounded. He saved it." The queen's gaze sharpened. "Show me." Harlan signaled the medical wing. Within minutes, Marco appeared on the screen, holding the hatchling in his arms. The small creature stirred, opening its eyes, and for the first time since its rescue, it gave a sound that was strong and clear. The queen's eyes softened. The glow around her crest brightened. "My child," she whispered. The hall fell silent. Every human felt the weight of her words. This was not just any hatchling. This was the daughter of a queen. The queen turned her gaze on Marco. Her voice shifted, no longer thunder, but steel wrapped in silk. "You carried her when she was weak. You gave her warmth when she had none. No alien has ever done such a thing for my blood." Marco stood firm, though his heart raced. She was only a child. "I could not leave her." The queen studied him for a long moment. Around her, the fleet waited, weapons glowing faintly. Finally, she spoke again. "You risked much for her. For that, I will not strike. But know this, human. My daughter's life is bound to me. Where she goes, my fleet follows. And now, because of your choice, my eyes are upon your kind." The transmission ended. The screen went dark, leaving only the faint hum of machines. The crew stared in silence. Some trembled. Others wept with relief that they were still alive. But none could ignore the truth. A single act of mercy had drawn the gaze of an empire. Marco looked down at the hatchling in his arms. She rested peacefully, her trust in him unshaken. He knew then that his life and the life of every human in the outpost had changed forever. The shadows had come. And they would not leave soon. The outpost shook with tension after the queen's message ended. The hall was filled with whispers, shouts, and nervous questions. No one knew what would happen next. The alien fleet still hovered above the moon, their massive ships like shadows covering the stars. Every scanner warned of their power. The humans felt small, fragile, and powerless. Captain Harlan stood on the deck, his shoulders heavy. He knew the outpost had no chance if the aliens decided to strike. Their shields were thin, their weapons weak, their escape ships too slow. All they could do was wait for the Queen's next command. But in the medical wing, Marco focused only on the hatchling. The small creature lay in his arms, breathing steady now. Its pale scales had begun to glow faintly, as though light lived beneath its skin. Each time the hatchling opened its eyes, they followed Marco with trust and warmth. To him, that trust was more important than the fleet outside. The quiet did not last long. A sharp signal rang through the dome. The Queen had sent another message. Harlan hurried to the deck and opened the channel. The Queen appeared again, her tall figure glowing with authority. Her voice was clear, echoing across the hall. "Bring the one who carried my child. Bring him to the edge of your dome. I will see him with my own eyes." The humans froze. The order was simple, yet filled with danger. None of them knew what the Queen intended. Some feared she meant to punish. Others thought she might demand surrender. All eyes turned to Marco. Marco did not speak right away. He looked at the hatchling in his arms, then slowly nodded. "I will go," he said quietly. The captain frowned. "You do not know what she wants. If you step outside, she could take you, or worse." Marco met his eyes. "She is the mother of this child. She deserves to see who kept her alive. If danger comes, I will face it. But I will not hide." The crew could not argue. They saw the calm in his face, the steady way he held the hatchling. At last, Harlan sighed. "Very well. But know that all our lives may hang on what happens next." The outer doors of the dome opened with a hiss. Dust swirled in the thin air. Marco stepped out onto the rocky ground, the hatchling wrapped carefully against his chest. The alien fleet hovered above, silent and vast. One of the ships moved forward, larger than the rest. Its hull shimmered with colors like a living sky. From its underside, a beam of light stretched down, touching the ground before Marco. The air vibrated with energy. Slowly, a figure emerged from the light. The Queen stepped onto the rocky surface, taller than any human, her crest glowing with shifting patterns. Her eyes burned with power, yet carried a depth of sorrow and pride. She stood before Marco, her gaze falling first on the hatchling. The small creature stirred, lifting its head weakly. Its eyes met the Queen's, and a soft sound escaped its throat. The Queen knelt, her tall frame folding gracefully, and reached out a clawed hand. The hatchling gave a faint cry of joy and pressed against her touch. For a long moment, the Queen said nothing. She looked down at her child, alive and safe, and then slowly lifted her gaze to Marco. "You carried her," the Queen said, her voice deep but not harsh. "You gave her warmth when her own kind could not reach her. Why did you do this, human?" Marco's voice was steady, though his heart pounded. She was alone. She was dying. "I could not leave her there. She is a child." That was enough. The Queen's eyes narrowed slightly, studying him as if searching his soul. The fleet above remained silent, waiting for her command. "Do you know who she is?" the Queen asked. Marco shook his head. "I only knew she needed me." The Queen's crest flared brighter. "She is not only my child. She is heir to my throne. Her life carries the weight of my people. To hold her was to hold the future of a kingdom." Marco's breath caught, but he did not step back. He only looked at the hatchling, who still rested peacefully in his arms. "To me, she was only a little one who needed help." That was enough reason. The Queen tilted her head. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the fleet. Finally, she rose to her full height. Her voice carried across the land. "Among my people, strength is shown in battle, but you, human, showed another strength. You risked your own for one not your own. That is rare even among my kind." Marco bowed his head slightly, unsure how to answer. The Queen extended her hand. "Give her to me." Marco hesitated, his arms tightening around the hatchling. The small creature clung to him with tiny claws, unwilling to let go. Marco looked into her eyes, then slowly shifted his hold and placed her in her mother's arms. The hatchling pressed against the Queen's chest, yet turned her head back toward Marco, making a soft call. The Queen noticed. Her expression softened. She looked down at her child, then at the human who had carried her. "She remembers you," the Queen said. "She trusts you. That is no small thing. Few outside our kind have ever earned such trust." Marco spoke quietly. "I only did what anyone should do." The Queen's eyes glowed. "Not anyone would. Many would have feared her, left her, or used her as a tool. You did none of these. For that you have my respect." Behind her, the fleet shifted, their lights dimming as if in answer to her words. The humans watching from inside the dome let out a breath of relief. No weapons fired. No flame struck the ground. The Queen turned back toward her ship, the hatchling safe in her arms. But before she stepped into the beam of light, she looked once more at Marco. "Human," she said. "Your kind is young in this galaxy. Many see you as weak, as wanderers with no place. But you have shown me a different truth. I will not forget it, and my people will not forget it." With that, she stepped into the beam, rising slowly into the vast ship above. The light vanished and silence returned to the rocky ground. Marco stood alone, the dust swirling around him. His arms felt strangely empty without the hatchling, yet his heart carried a weight he could not explain. He knew this was not the end. This meeting was only the beginning of something far greater. Inside the dome, the crew watched him return. Some looked at him with awe, others with disbelief. The captain met him at the door. "You may have saved us all," Harlan said quietly. "Or you may have tied us to powers beyond our reach. Time will tell." Marco only nodded, too tired to speak. He thought of the hatchling's eyes, the way she had looked back at him even in her mother's arms. He knew that bond would not be broken no matter how far she was taken. That night the outpost slept in uneasy peace. The fleet still hovered above, silent but no longer threatening. The humans knew they were watched, judged, and perhaps protected. None could predict what future would come from this fragile beginning. But in the heart of one human there was no doubt. He had carried a life through fire and fear, and in doing so he had changed the way two worlds would see each other. The days after the Queen's visit passed in a quiet haze. The human outpost had survived, though no one felt the same as before. Each night the sky above still glowed with the faint lights of the alien fleet. The massive ships no longer hovered in attack formation. Instead, they drifted calmly like watchful guardians. The crew of the outpost lived with a strange mix of fear and hope. Marco walked the halls often, his thoughts always heavy. His arms felt empty since the hatchling had been taken back by her mother. Yet deep inside he carried the warmth of her trust, a memory that would not fade. Sometimes in the silence of the dome he thought he could still hear her soft cry. Captain Harlan noticed the change in him. One evening, as the crew shared a quiet meal, the captain sat beside him. "You gave us more than survival, Marco," he said. "You gave us a chance. Whatever the Queen decides, she looked at us differently because of you. I believe she will return." Marco only nodded. He wanted to believe it too. Weeks passed. The fleet above slowly began to withdraw, ship by ship. At last, only the Queen's vessel remained. When she finally departed, the stars felt strangely empty. The crew feared they would never know what her words truly meant. But the galaxy does not forget such moments. The hatchling's growth years passed. The human colony grew stronger. New domes were built, new fields stretched across the moon's surface, and trade routes opened with nearby outposts. Yet the memory of the Queen and her fleet never left them. One morning, a signal broke through their systems, stronger than anything they had ever received. The voice that filled the dome was clear, powerful, and familiar. "Humans of the moon colony," it said. "I am Lyra, daughter of the Queen. You knew me once as a hatchling. I have not forgotten." The crew rushed to the deck in shock. On the screen appeared a figure tall and radiant, scales shimmering with light. Her eyes burned with the same fire as her mother, but her voice carried warmth. Behind her stood a council of alien leaders. Marco felt his chest tighten. He remembered the small creature that had once rested in his arms. Now she stood proud, speaking across the stars. "I carry a message from my mother," Lyra continued. "The human who carried me saved more than my life. He saved the bond between our worlds. Because of his choice, my people see yours with respect. Now I call upon that bond. Come to our homeworld. Speak before our council. Let us begin what my mother promised." The crew turned as one toward Marco. He felt the weight of every eye upon him. His voice was quiet but steady. "If she calls, I will answer. Journey to the homeworld." The humans prepared their best ship, polished and strengthened for the long journey. As Marco stepped aboard, Captain Harlan clasped his shoulder. "You go not only as yourself, you go carrying all of us. Remember that." The ship lifted off, breaking through the silence of space. Days stretched into weeks as the vessel crossed the endless dark. Finally, the homeworld of the Queen's people appeared ahead. It was vast, glowing with oceans that shimmered like silver and mountains that burned with inner fire. The skies were alive with countless ships, each one larger than any human craft. Marco felt his breath catch. He had never seen such a world. Guided by signals, their ship descended toward a city that seemed carved from light itself. Towers rose like living crystals, their surfaces glowing with shifting colors. At the heart of the city stood a grand hall, wide enough to hold entire domes. When the ship landed, a group of alien guards approached. Their armor shone like polished stone, their movements smooth and powerful. But they did not raise their weapons. Instead, they bowed their heads in silence. Marco stepped down onto the shining ground. He felt small among them, yet he walked with steady steps. The council inside the hall, the council waited. Rows of alien leaders sat upon high seats, their eyes glowing as they studied the human visitor. At the center stood Lyra, tall and radiant. When she saw Marco, her crest glowed brightly, a sign of welcome. "You came," she said, her voice carrying across the hall. "I knew you would." Marco bowed his head slightly. "You called, and I remembered." The council leader rose. His voice was deep and ancient. "Human, you are here because of a bond none of us expected. Speak now. Why did you risk your life for one who was not your kind?" Marco's voice was simple, clear. Because she was a child. Because she was alone. Because no life should be left to die when it can be saved. The hall grew silent. The leaders looked at one another, their glowing eyes filled with thought. At last Lyra stepped forward. "My counsel," she said. "This is the truth of humanity. They are not only seekers of land or trade. They are givers of care even when there is no reward. This man showed me a bond beyond blood. That bond is why I live. That bond is why I stand here now." The council leader's crest flickered with light. Slowly he turned to Marco. "Your kind is young, human. But through you we see a strength not of weapons but of heart. Perhaps it is time we open our gates to you." Murmurs spread through the hall. Some leaders nodded, others hesitated, but none raised their voice in anger. The decision was clear. The alliance from that day, an agreement was written. Humans would not stand alone in the galaxy. They would walk beside the Queen's people, learning and trading, growing together. Lyra herself placed a crest upon Marco's shoulder, a mark of honor among her kind. "You carried me when I could not walk," she said. "Now I carry your people into the stars. We are bound, always." The human colony received the news with joy. For the first time they felt not as wanderers but as part of something greater. Ships began to travel freely between worlds, carrying knowledge and hope. Marco remained humble through it all. He did not see himself as a hero. He saw himself only as the man who once carried a small hatchling, giving her warmth when no one else could. Yet that simple act had changed the path of two civilizations. The return of the hatchling years later, Marco stood once more on the rocky surface of the moon. The air was thin, the sky wide and cold, yet his heart felt light. Above him a massive ship descended, glowing with colors of dawn. From its beam stepped Lyra, no longer a child but still carrying the same bright fire in her eyes. She walked to him, her tall frame casting a long shadow, and then she knelt down just as her mother had once done. "You carried me when I was small," she said softly. "Now I carry you as family. You will never be forgotten." Marco smiled faintly. "And I will never forget you." The two stood side by side, one human and one alien, looking out at the stars together. The galaxy was vast, filled with dangers and wonders, but between their worlds a bridge had been built, and it had begun with one choice, one act of care, one hatchling carried through the fire.